Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Called Bank Sports. Today we're going to discuss the play-in tournament and how we think that impacts not just the NBA playoffs, but really the NBA as a whole. And I honestly think that it's one of the best things that has ever happened to the NBA. And I personally hope that they keep this um, forever. I really truly think it's going to change the dynamic of the NBA and the product that we get year in and year out. So basically, I just wanted to do an episode trashing Mark Cuban and Luka Doncic for everything that they said. So that's where this is going to go. But Dale, kind of, what's your thoughts on just Dallas? And it looks like they're going to avoid the play-in tournament. But a few weeks back when they were just making it very clear how dumb of an idea they thought this was.
Well, I don't know. Everyone has they might change their mind in a few years if the NBA keeps this. But obviously, if you put your mindset with Dallas, you're thinking you've had some tough times with COVID. You this year's a big year for you because you had an awesome playoff performance last year. You really want to build on that, and you've had some bad luck up until this point. And then now you're getting told that, okay, you haven't had a great season. You fought back, and at the time they were, I'm guessing they were in the 7th seed. So they're thinking, if we stay here, we'll have to do a play-in tournament, and that puts you immediately at a slight disadvantage because you just have that extra game right before the series starts. And so I'm guessing that's probably what was going on. They're just they felt like a lot of things had gone bad, and this was just not helping things. And I don't know, Mark Cuban, he's obviously really opinionated, but he's changed his mind in the past, and so he may keep this opinion, and I'm sure he'll have his reasons for that. But maybe as he watches this play out a little more, if the NBA decides to keep this long term, then he might change his mind about it.
I think the best thing I've heard about Mark Cuban, and I couldn't find it written down anywhere when I was looking for it this morning, but apparently, according to sources, he was one of the owners who was pushing for it and just absolutely on board and got it passed, and he was a big advocate for it. So that's why I think it's so funny. Is it really is just a case of, oh, all of a sudden this is impacting us. I don't.
We weren't supposed to be this bad.
We weren't supposed to be this bad. The Suns weren't supposed to be ahead of us. What's going on? And so that's why I think it's just pretty funny overall is the teams that are going to be mad about it are the teams who it really impacts. And that's going to be the 7 and the 8th seed. While the 9 and the 10 seed are going to be thrilled about it because in years past, they would have just been told, hey, better luck next time. If you're in the West, we know you're better than pretty much the 6th through the 8th seed in the East, but this is just how it shakes out. And now there's actually a chance, to see if someone's surging to get the best team there. And I don't even think that that's why it's so good. I don't think it's good because you'll get in an extra couple games. I don't think it's good because of ratings or even giving the best teams the chance of getting in there. Those are all great things. But what are you not seeing this year? You're not seeing tanking. And that's what I never want to see. And so all of a sudden, now instead of having the top 10 teams fighting for the top 8 spots, you have the top 12 or 13 or maybe even 14 teams. That didn't happen this year, but right now you've got the top 12 teams, it looks like, in each conference fighting for those top 10 seeds.
And do you know off the top of your head, if you're a 10 seed at the end of the season, but then you win the play-in tournament to get an 8 seed, do you still get a lottery pick, or do you lose the lottery pick or do they reseed it at that point?
I don't know off the top of my head. I cannot imagine a world in where they'd give the 10 seed the lottery. Or else I would honestly just drop down to the 9 seed intentionally. If I'd be like, can we get the 9 seed? So I think that they just kind of end up reseeding it based off of how it goes. So I don't know if it will be, I don't know how it will work exactly, if the team that loses the 9-10 matchup will be the 10 seed, or if it'll just be based off of record at the end. But I can't imagine a world where they would end up giving where they'd give, a team in the playoffs a lottery pick because of where they were seeded at the end of the year, not based on where they were seeded in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting. So I feel like I don't think it would impact things either way what they did, because I feel
Yeah.
like once you get there, you don't want to risk not making the playoffs, and so I don't think you'd see many teams like 8 seeds dropping down to 9 just like because they feel confident they can win. Um, but I don't know, that'd be interesting because like if a 10 seed does that, that'd be like those fans would be like the biggest winners because
They really would be.
they still get like a top 14 pick and they make the playoffs. And
Yeah.
so like that's pretty sweet.
So, yeah, no, it would be crazy. And I think what I kind of realized last night when I was thinking about this more is how does this make the 1v2 seed argument for the Jazz in some cases obsolete? Or how does it end up mattering for the Jazz? Like, where do things end up matching up there? Since, yeah, I really don't want to play Portland if we end up in the 2 seed, which is a possibility. But let's say Portland just has a bad game against Memphis or, whoever they're playing in that first game, and all of a sudden Memphis is the 7 seed or San Antonio is the 7 seed. And then Portland gets the 8th seed. I think the Jazz would be on the right side of that one, not having to play Damian Lillard and Nurkic and not McConnell. What name am I going for?
McCollum.
Help me. McCollum, thank you. CJ there, but yeah, so I think it's kind of interesting how, yes, you want the 1 seed because it gives you home court advantage throughout your conference, and in the Jazz's case, most likely throughout the entire playoffs. But it kind of makes it to where maybe the 8th seed is actually the 7th best team, but they just ended up dropping a game where that they should have won.
Yeah, because like historically, 7th or 8th seeds winning their first series is extremely low. I don't think it'll actually have any major impacts, but you're right, it does make it a little more exciting, and it does make the 1-2 seed closer to being equal because there's that chance that you play. At the same time though, being the 1 seed is still better because then you have a chance of playing anyone 7 to 10. But
yeah.
How the tournament works though, if you're the 2 seed, you're playing 7 or 8.
No, that is definitely true. And here's what makes it really hard. If you're, if you end up being the 8th seed, is you had to play, 2 games to get there. You're going to have very limited rest going into your first game against the 1 seed. And let's say that you're the 10 seed and you had to play both of those games away, and then you're flying to play the 1 seed at home. Or even if you're the 9 seed or the 7 seed and got one of those games at home, you're still playing those 3 games at 3 different locations.
Yeah, that's true. Like that could make it a bigger advantage for the 1 or 2 seed because they're playing a team who just had kind of some road trips. Probably less so for the 2 seed.
Yeah.
Because one game is and they probably have to wait for the second game to be played, so they'll have some time to rest in between. And I don't know. This is all speculation. It's probably going to like make minor impacts on anything on that what would have been the outcome otherwise. But it's like that might actually make it tougher for a 2 seed because like what we saw last year with the play-in, where Portland went on a streak, they won the play-in game and they were doing really well. While the Lakers were like resting for the second half of the bubble, and so the Lakers were a little bit rusty, and Portland played the Lakers that first round when Portland just went on a streak, and that's why Portland won that first game of the series because they were hot.
Yeah.
But then once the Lakers like got a little bit of the rust off, then they won out. So
yeah, we saw what happened there. So that's the thing. The dominoes for a 7 or an 8th seed to upset the 1 or the 2 pretty much just need to all fall in the right spot. You don't have the luxury of being so good that you're just able to overcome obstacles. And so that's why we're really being super nitpicky about how this will impact them. And it's because teams at that level are often a lot more impacted by super small things than teams at higher levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm like overall, I'm a little bit indifferent to the play-in tournament just because I feel like at the end of the day it won't make a big difference. Oh, and there's my dog. Maybe he won't come through in the recording in the final version, but we'll see.
We will
But
see.
I think like the biggest benefit of this is like you mentioned, the tanking is almost all the way gone.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sold 100% that the play-in tournament is the best way to do it, but I feel like it's the best thing that we've had in a long time. So I'd be curious I'd want the NBA to keep this unless they find a better way to prevent tanking.
Yeah. I'm open to hear any other solutions. Like, leave it in the comments, whatever you can think. I mean, who knows? Maybe we set it up like the Premier League over in Europe, where the G League, the best team in the G League, comes up and takes over for the worst team in the NBA. But
that would be hilarious.
Which is never going to happen. I would love to see that implemented, but there's way too much money in the NBA, and just the way U.S. sports leagues are run is so different. But I mean, take a look at it. Like, the Jazz are playing Toronto tonight, who's 26-37, and they are, let's see, 7 games out of I apologize, 4.5 games out of the 8th seed. Like, maybe they'd still be fighting, but they're definitely at that point on the far outside looking in. But instead, they're only 3 games out of the 10 seed, and it's still going to be hard for them to get there, but it's definitely a lot more feasible. You have Chicago, who's also 3 games out of the 10 seed. And look at what they did at the trade deadline to try to make the playoffs.
When was the last time because at the time, I think they moved up a couple places, but at the time they were like a 12 place in the conference or something.
I think they dropped. I think they were actually in like the 8th or 9th spot, and they were trying to solidify themselves, but they just have not melded well at all.
But that's another good point, though, is that makes the trade deadline really interesting because now there's a lot more buyers.
There's a lot more buyers,
there being
and
a lot more buyers,
sellers.
There's a lot less sellers. So we might have less exciting trade deadlines, except for this year that wasn't the case at all. I feel like it's almost the trajectory of the teams because the Bulls feel like they have a future. Well, the Magic, they feel like they've gotten the best out of the players, and with that squad they kind of peaked. So they didn't have any motivation to try to build for the future.
And I personally would love seeing a league where there's a lot less sellers at the trade deadline. It's not my favorite to, see teams go out and like land massive deals at the trade deadline. It's awesome for discussion. It's like really fun, but from kind of like a fact, it's like, oh yay, the Lakers got somebody else good. Oh yay, the Cavs grabbed another like elite veteran. Yay. And I know there was a lot of frustration at the buyout market. I still don't necessarily feel like Griffin or Drummond are going to have super big impact on those teams. I think that people are kind of more frustrated about the names than, who the players actually are at this point. But I think seeing less crazy and like big midseason acquisitions is just better for, at the very minimum, small markets as a whole. And that's really where my perspective comes in as a Jazz fan, is I really don't like seeing those trades because they always seem to benefit big markets versus benefiting small markets.
Yeah, and that would be an interesting thing to go into after the playoffs are done, and like when we have less content to talk about here. But that'd be interesting to talk about, like what the best strategies are for small market teams, because it feels like the current system is set up to benefit big markets. But the Jazz, like you see the Jazz and the Bucks and the Suns and the Nuggets are all small market teams that have built a really good team without the superstar signing. So it'd be interesting to go and analyze what these best strategies are and kind of what we can look for in the offseason for the small market teams.
Yeah. And it's hard because Yeah, I don't know what the NBA should do. I don't think they should necessarily give small markets all of these benefits, especially when last week we talked about, and I still don't have any data pulled up for it. I should have done that. How much more money the big market teams make when they're showing up in the finals. Like, it's a significantly larger viewership, so that's a lot more money for the NBA. And so that's why, in the end, it's always going to feel like the league is made for large market teams, is because they make that much more money. So there's not a lot of incentive for the NBA to write rules that somehow benefit the small market teams. I don't necessarily think the rules right now, only benefit large markets. I think they're written in a way where, yeah, it's fair in theory. It just ends up being lots of players want to go to LA or want to be in Miami and, are starting to look like maybe they want to be in New York. We'll see if, the Knicks and the Nets actually stay good these next in a decade or so. But that's where players want to be more than players wanting to be, in Utah or in Phoenix for whatever reason. I guess maybe it's the nightlife, who knows, but
Yeah, and I feel like things are getting better, because if you look at the history of the NBA, like what percentage of championships came from LA and Boston?
so
It's like
many.
probably almost half of all championships came
Yeah.
from those two cities. So, but I feel like in recent years we've been starting to see a little bit more diversity, um, and there's reasons for that, like that aren't the NBA doing stuff like LeBron winning in Cleveland. NBA didn't change any rule, but LeBron just decided to go there, and with LeBron there,
Yeah.
you probably want to win one. The Raptors winning one, and so it's like, and that was a trade. So I feel like we're
Yeah.
starting to see more diversity, but that will be something to look at over the years and see, is it actually getting more fair for small markets, or is this like just a few fluke years recently?
Yeah. Speaking of Toronto, this is kind of an out there. I'm super interested to see if COVID is going to strain Toronto's relationship with like the city and with the country. And I don't want to see Toronto leave Canada, but that is, like you said, kind of a small market. That it's kind of interesting though, because if you're going to cheer for an NBA team in Canada, you're probably going to cheer for Toronto, just
Hmm.
based on the fact
The,
it's the only one in your country. But you know, is this the beginning of the end for Toronto? And is there a chance they move down to the United States because of like frustrations with the government? I don't think it's going to happen. But if they
yeah,
moved here in the next decade, I could definitely see like them having to play in Tampa this year kind of being the catalyst.
that'd be interesting. And even though like Toronto's a big city, but it's just tough to talk people into moving out of the U.S.
Yeah.
A lot of players are from the U.S. and they don't want to move out of the U.S. So
Yeah. I also don't have a lot of data on this, so I could be 100% wrong. But lots of players also kind of, when they're looking at places, don't really want to be in the places with high tax rates. Um, and I think that's why it would be like, obviously players still want to go to LA, which has a high tax rate. But if you don't want to be in Toronto, and then I'm pretty sure they have a pretty high tax rate, so then all of a sudden you throw that on top of it, like if you're losing 30% of your income based on off of depending on how they do things, where, if you're in Portland and there's no income tax in Portland, all of a sudden things are looking really differently on how much money you're making.
well, with that logic, then Utah and the Texas teams should be doing great for themselves.
I've seen that discussed on free agents, like just with Texas, where I don't think you have income tax in Texas, or it's really low if it exists. And I have seen them kind of discuss on ESPN, like comparing, this is how much money you actually make in California, and this is how much money you actually make in Texas. And I
And
mean,
and
it's
when
to
you're
the tune of
talking about
millions of
$20 billion
dollars.
contracts,
Yeah.
like that's a lot of money.
No, it is a lot of money. So that's why Aaron Rodgers has said, like, when he retires, which obviously there's a lot of NFL drama there. You can get into it in the comments if you want. But he has said he's definitely moving back to California after he retires because he loves living in California. He'll also just be living somewhere else, and he basically hinted at, he'll spend a lot of time in California, but his residency will be somewhere else, and that's where he will pay his income taxes.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Hey, well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We're getting close to the end of the season here. We're excited to see where the Jazz end up seeding out this next week. So let us know in the comments where you think they're going to finish, what you think about the potential first-round matchups and who you want to see them play. And thank you so much for watching. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and go Jazz!